Welcome to another Manic and Chill episode. Recently, we've covered such topics as tearing up from wide receivers and tearing down from wide receivers. Today, I want to talk about something that I think we both really like, trades, right? Whole Dynasty Trades at 5, that's kind of our thing. We like talking about trades. And one of the things I always find interesting is trade value and the perception of what a player should be worth versus the practicality of what a player actually is worth. And when you do try to trade them, you'll hear analysts a lot of times talk about when they talk about trades, and someone will tweet at them that, oh, well, not in my league. That would never happen in my league. You get that comment a lot, which could be true. But what is that based on? So first player that popped into my head when I was thinking about this subject is Dalton Kincaid. There's a lot of complaints that you can't trade him for what people think he should be worth. He's the tight end 6 overall, right? He went about 107, 108 in rookie drafts. So people feel almost like you should be obligated to overpay to get Dalton Kincaid, which is, I just think, is an interesting dynamic and an interesting phenomenon. So if you've Dalton Kincaid on your roster, which you don't because you wouldn't have paid the cost for him, but let's just pretend that you do. Somehow you accidentally drafted him at 109. Maybe you fat fingered a deal. If someone comes and offers you Treylon Burks, is that enough? Considering that Dalton Kincaid, again, is the tight end 6 overall in ADP, and in rookie drafts was going in the first round. So essentially you're trading a 23 first for Treylon Burks.
So here's what immediately pops in my head when you answer that, when you ask me that question. Probably not, but then I go right back to why. So if you say, I will give you Treylon Burks for Dalton Kincaid, and I say no, I have to then ask myself why. What is going through my mind when I just say no? Because we do this all the time on the live streams. We will just answer trade questions. The answer is in our head, but then we have to sit there and think about the logic behind it. And sometimes the logic behind it is just ingrained in the way that we're thinking, and we're making a lot of assumptions that may not be true in every league. So in that example, the answer is no, but then I immediately go, okay, what is Dalton Kincaid, tight end 6? It is a player that I think I should be getting something more for, or more importantly, something different for. It almost feels like I'm settling doing a 1-for-1. And so immediately I see a 1-for-1. There's no leverage on my side. I'm not getting an extra shot. I'm not getting an extra second. And then I'm sitting here going, well, why would I reject that trade? And my mind goes to, well, I think I can get more or something different for Kincaid. Again, that's what I keep saying. So then I think you have to go back to do this exercise. So just for everybody, forget about Dalton Kincaid, forget about Treylon Burks. Pull up whatever list of player ranks, ADP, whatever you use, and just look at the names, okay? Look at where they're sitting. Use startup ADP, I think, because that is a good place where you can get just a true order of players from what you perceive to be the value standpoint. But then you go and you just go down the list and you go through each player and you see, okay, that player's here, that player's here. And without even knowing it, in your head, if you really do this exercise, you get to Dalton Kincaid, tight end 6, and you go, how the hell is he tight end 6? And clearly, without it being broken down on the screen, the majority of the reason he's tight end 6 is for exactly the reason that I just gave on that trade. Future potential, future value. Don't want to trade him now, or he should be here because I think in a year I'll be able to move him for even more. Like, he has the potential to get to the Mark Andrews range to where he's worth more. So I'm going to draft him higher now. And that is the difference in startup ADP versus just like a trade calculator value. And a lot of them just go hand in hand, and why you can't get deals done with certain types of assets. And a lot of times it's younger players, it's newer players to the trade market. And those are the ones you go, there's no way the trade value actually lines up with the player value. As we get closer to the season, it's even more exaggerated because people start looking at what is going to help me right now. As Dynasty becomes a year-to-year, week-to-week game, the idea of holding a lot of extra quote-unquote value just in young players that haven't done anything seems like a sucker bet. But then year after year, you see those types of players in the startups going higher than they probably should. So it's this weird dynamic where you have to look at each player and go, why is their value where it is? There's some guys you're going to get to. Cooper Kupp. Why the hell is he wide receiver 13?
Well, you know what?
You expect him to smash right now. There's no other reason. There's no future value in him at all.
Maybe it's just me, but we forget the lack of available options. The fact that the other options, right? Like we talk about rookie drafts all the time, just for example, like Dalton Kincaid at 109, 110, 111. We're like, that's a horrible pick. But then we have to take it into the context of, well, what else was available? And I think that's where people sometimes take startup and rookie draft values and kind of try to impose it upon actual trade values is, well, that's who was available in the startup. Like, you didn't have a choice. Like, your options were Dalton Kincaid or Kendre Miller, for example. Well, yes, you're going to take Dalton Kincaid in that point, and you can't trade out. Well, we're just assuming you couldn't trade out at that spot in the rookie draft or at that spot in the startup. So at that point, you had to make a pick. You had to pick a player, and they might not be the ideal player, but it's a tight end 6 in that setting. But when you get to the real world, you're like, well, yeah, he's the tight end 6 or he's the running back 12. But what does that actually mean? You know, I think rankings might be one of the things where rankings isn't actually a good evaluation of players. Like, I mean, it is because you have to put them in some order. I think obviously tiers is better. But when you're looking at rankings, you're trying to use that as a trade tool. I think you might be a little skewed. And that's where sometimes people might lose out on what's a practical trade versus what they think they should get.
Well, you hit on the word tiers, which I think is very important because we see tight end 6, but yet in a startup, there's probably a place where I go, I never want to draft the tight end 6. I just want to keep pushing it down the road to the point where there will be a breaking point. Like, I'm pulling up Bulletproof's ADP right now. So they have Dalton Kincaid, tight end 7. Okay. No PPR, just PPR, no premium. But he's going in front of the likes of Zay Flowers, Jordan Love, Jahan Dotson, Russell Wilson, Marquise Brown, Amari Cooper, Christian Kirk, Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, Deontay Johnson, bunch of guys that you're like, all right, I would clearly take the quarterbacks or the wide receiver 2/3s ahead of him, or the receivers that were first round picks I would take over Dalton Kincaid. But you're not. So if you just look at that and just take this list, and this is just one example, you could see that people paying Dalton Kincaid's price over the likes of those guys is basically them saying, I not only think he's going to be worth more in the future, but I'm drafting him to be, he's already going to be a difference maker tight end. Because we know inherently if he just becomes Pat Freiermuth, do you really want him over Deontay Johnson, or do you want him over Chris Godwin? Do you want him over Russell Wilson? Or, you know what I mean? Like, you would not take a tight end that's just a guy that's good, but is just in that like streaming territory. You would not take that over a starting quarterback or a potential receiver that could finish top 24. So there's already, you can just tell, but without getting the context, you can tell with where he's placed in a range where people are already leaning towards the bet of he's going to be a difference maker. Now, here's the two others, Michael Mayer and Sam Laporta. They're going ahead of the likes of Brock Purdy, Will Levis, Mac Jones, Kadarius Toney, Mike Evans. Like, those are the types where you go, okay, if I'm wrong on the tight end, fine, because I'm not giving anything up. But you can just see the difference between how Kincaid is being treated and how those other two are being treated. And that's one of the reasons I've just been off Kincaid. I don't see the difference between those three. The odds that they all end up in the Evan Ingram, Pat Freiermuth range is pretty high because they're already valued there. So they have to go up another tier or two to even get to a point where I'm going to consider picking them over any good receiver, any starting quarterback. And I think that's where you get to this. Okay.
So well, let me ask you this. So that does get me to this question then, right? So at 110, knowing that Dalton Kincaid is probably the ADP, he's the correct choice at the rookie draft. And I'm sorry for beating Dalton Kincaid. Just use any player's name. It really doesn't matter. Should I just be going against the grain? Because that's it. That's his limit, right? He's never going to be worth more than that. And unless he turns into Travis Kelce. And guess what? He's not going to, right? Pat Freiermuth was a great comp. So Pat Freiermuth is his ceiling. Should I just be going Kendre Miller? I know you hate him, but even off the off chance that, you know what, he could play himself into a starting running back role. And if he does that, his value, trade value at least, will be infinitely more useful or higher than Dalton Kincaid, who, again, looking at Dalton Kincaid and not to beat on him, just looking at the trade value that you're getting for him on DLF, you're not getting what you would think you should be getting for a player that's seemingly everyone you just named that's being drafted after him, you can't trade him for, which I find hilarious. But he's going before in an ADP. Like, if you were to offer me Amari Cooper for Dalton Kincaid, I would smash that. Marquise Brown for Dalton Kincaid, I would smash that. And in theory, you would think if he's being drafted that high and being drafted before those players, you should be able to trade him for them, except that I don't see any trades being made like that anywhere in leagues that I'm in or anecdotally.
Well, the players don't matter, but the reason we picked Kincaid is because he is one of those guys where you look and you go, it just doesn't make sense from probably the production you're going to get early versus what his actual trade value is versus what his ADP value is. They're all over the place. But let's go back to your example, because I think this is the crucial point of this show. You need to know your format. This is why when I give dynasty analysis of I don't care where I can get Dalton Kincaid in a PPR. I have no interest in taking him, because the only reason I'm drafting him is I go, okay, if I'm at that spot where it's 110 and Johnston, Addison, and Flowers are gone, and I'm now having to dip into the quote unquote kind of like shitty running backs or the other tight ends or Will Levis. I'm just giving this year's class example because that's where we're most recently coming off of. If I'm at that 110, that's the dead range. That's the range. You need to identify that range before it comes up and get out of it. But even if you can't, and somebody even makes a mistake ahead of you and leaves you a player, there might be a reason to hold on to that pick. But if you're talking 111, 112, where you know there's probably not going to be enough mistakes to get you to a player you really want to draft, you are stuck. You're immediately going, okay, I don't want to take a running back because I'm drafting a round 3 running back probably. That's another asset where you're going, the only path to the round 3 running back is they have to end up popping like a Dameon Pierce or Rashad White. That's the only path for them. And if you're telling me that's the best path for them, are they really any valuable than Pat Freiermuth? Not really. So the outcome that I could get on one of those guys is limited as well. So you've taken both picks, whether it's a running back there or Kincaid, and you're going immediately, I'm taking him because I hope I can get more for him later. You're already to that point. So follow the format. Don't get yourself stuck in those formats where if you're in a PPR league, start 9 PPR league, you have to be realistic as to like the 109, 110, 111, 112. Those picks aren't worth anything. They're worth more based on the name perception. And you talk about this all the time. If you're in a start 12, okay, I'll just add whoever because I need players. I need good players. If it's a start 9 PPR only, dump those picks before they become those picks. You need to understand this is not the format just to take Kincaid because of his talent. And the way we play the process over players, we don't care who the name is. We don't care the name is Dalton Kincaid. The only reason I care about that is because someone else might care, and I think I can trade him. And that's back to the Treylon Burks example you started with. I feel like I'm settling just in my mind, like, oh man, all I'm getting is Treylon Burks. But then you really think about it, like, is there an outcome where I'm actually going to be able to get more? So I think that's the exercise with a lot of players. It's not just Kincaid. It's a lot of rookies. It's a lot of players where you think they're higher valued or the market thinks they're higher valued, but then you actually go to the trade market and someone else just says, yeah, maybe I like that player, but I'm not trading for the type of asset where you're holding all the value and potential or you're holding all the value in great. You trade for Mike Kincaid, Shane, guess what? The problem that I had is now your problem because you're sitting there, well, I'm only trading for him so I can flip him for more. But if you can't, now you have more work added to your plate to be able to get out of that asset later.
Do we have a blind spot for production where we overlook what production we can get out of that player, say on a year-to-year basis? Because immediately we're like, well, I want to move off of Kincaid. I want to stop using him. Let's just see. And there's a late first round running back. And immediately, let's say second round, because immediately we're looking at him. What can I get for him in the future? Should we be drafting thinking of, well, what production can I get out of him? Or are we right to say, you know what, you probably shouldn't even be looking at the production because that's harder to predict than the path to fantasy relevancy or the path to him increasing in value to a first round pick where I can move him?
I think this is a whole separate topic, but I'll give you the 30-second answer. When it comes to a PPR tight end, the odds that the production is ever worth drafting at that point is extremely, extremely low. You mentioned he has to hit Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce range. He literally has to hit that range before you feel burned with that pick. And it's burned with the pick of, if I go up to bat in the 9th inning and I'm down 3 runs, a double does me no good, right? The only thing a double can do is hope that it starts a rally where 4 people after me all get hits and we score 4 runs and win. I'd much rather just hit a home run because I've just chipped away on what I'm going to need. I need 3 runs. I just literally hit 1 myself. I didn't rely on everything else. So it just feels like drafting a tight end in that format, it is just basically a placeholder. And knowing the way the scoring distribution works and the warp works in a PPR league like that, it's just not worth taking, which is why when I do mock drafts and talk about these players, I don't even want to bother. There isn't a point, and I think that's extreme, but I got into mock drafts this year in PPR. I won't even take a tight end. Third round, I won't take Kincaid because I don't want to just assume that when I draft him, I can trade him for more because not every league is like that. So don't even have them on the radar, which is going to make you go, well, damn, there's nobody to draft. That's true. That's the point of the exercise, is understanding where in certain formats you want to take certain positions and certain players. And when those run out, learn in the future and get rid of those picks before they become bad on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, and that should almost go without saying, is as soon as you realize, as soon as you identify that these are going to be late round picks, what you should be doing is using them as trade assets as opposed to making the picks. And obviously, there's situations where it makes sense to make the picks. When you're just in a complete rebuild, you have nothing but picks. Fine, take the shot. You know what I mean? But even then, it feels like you should be taking the shot on the player, like you said, that could be the home run. It's kind of like the new baseball. Well, not new baseball, but how they've played for the last 5 or 6 years, where everything's either a strikeout or a home run, and that's fine. Those are the optimum outcomes.
And 12 teams start 9 PPR. If you have seconds and thirds, if you're having to draft Chase Brown and Chris Rodriguez, you've already lost, because those would have been better spent buying Jamal Williams or Zonovan Knight and getting some points out of them, versus now all you're doing is hoping that those running backs that you have a better market than what you just spent, and they probably don't. So I get it. Any running back, draft them when you don't have anything else to take. Just draft a running back. But I'm starting to even realize that strategy is better realized when you save those picks and you literally just throw them away in the season. It's like going to a carnival and you're just putting money into the carnival games. You know you're going to lose 98% of them, but you had that fun in that moment. It's the same thing as throwing away those picks. The only avenue those picks are worth more is if you can use them in another trade. It's always back to the, what can I do in the trade value to get something else that I like? But a lot of times, it's today's dynasty game, using those picks on players, for the most part, given how players are valued now when they're young, is just, you're just better off trading the picks.
As always, if you're watching this show, feel free to give us some ideas, because this is your show, right? We want to talk about what the community actually cares about, as long as it's not rankings or top 10 lists or fucking buy sells. We're all for it. If we want to make you use your brain, if you want to just read lists, that's fine too. You want to just hear lists, there's plenty of content that'll do that. But we want to use your brain, make you use your brain, because I think the more you expand that, the better you are at Dynasty football.
Yep,
so,
leave us suggestions.
Yeah, leave us suggestions. This is Manic and Chill. Appreciate you guys checking in.